Hey everyone, this is GosuDad and welcome back to the Blizzard Online Ladder. This is my game between Goroth and myself, TVT, on the map Shakuras Plateau. Played this game earlier today in the morning, and we are back here to review it and to take a look at what I did wrong, what happened to the Build Your Own Banshee build, and how my attempt at deviating from the typical 1-1-1 scenario in the early game led to a disruption in the economy, leading to a disruption throughout the build, leading to a couple of disastrous pushes at the end. So taking a look at my start here, pretty standard with the standard supply depot. My opponent Goroth doing the same. I am slightly ahead here with that supply depot, but Goroth is ahead of me in making the SCVs. So we are pretty close here at the beginning, and I think we'll start to see some deviations pretty quickly. Here we go for my starting barracks, doing a lot of clicking around there, trying to pull up the APM, I guess, and then just sitting there waiting for nothing. Alright, so that is a barracks coming down at 11, and this is where the build starts to change, deviate from what I had done previously. So in previous builds, at this point I'd be building a refinery and starting with well, about maybe 2 SCVs on gas, but instead I am saving up money. I'm not quite cutting SCVs to build a second barracks. So my theory here was that I want to build Marines steadily out of these barracks, and then go for the factory and then for the starport. And as soon as the starport is finished and has that Banshee coming out, as soon as I get my first Banshee, I should have about 9 or so Marines here, plus a tank or something from that factory, or maybe even a third barracks pumping out 1 Marauder or something like that. But one thing I really had not calculated upon is that this barracks slows down the building of the first refinery, or in this case the second one, as well as it causes, if I begin to pump Marines out of this second barracks, that's a 100 minerals per minute difference in the economy. And as we'll see, even though I'll have enough gas at some point, see I've got the 2 harvesters on this gas already, I'm going to be essentially mineral starved. I'm going to have just enough minerals to keep up with that Marine and SCV production, and I won't be able to build that factory for quite some time. Now, the original theory was that the first barracks will finish at 2.5 minutes, the second one finishes at 3, and the factory should start at 2.5, right? But you'll notice something there. That would require me to have enough minerals to start the second barracks and then start the factory, I don't know, 30 seconds later. And so that did not happen. So it took me quite a while before I started building the factory. You can see right here I have enough money for the factory, but instead I just continue to pump out Marines. So that was probably a big mistake there. The build is already behind, as I mentioned, off of the original plan. I mean, the original plan was that at, you know, super tight timings would mean the starport finishes at 4:30, which, you know, I am far away from. I mean, I haven't even built the factory yet. And look at that, isn't that crazy? So that is a big difference. Now, Goroth, he is going for triple barracks, and he's already got a tech lab with stims started up here. So he's actually gone down that research tech route, but teching his infantry units, so that's going to come in really handy for him later, as we will see. So finally building this factory. Now I did take some time to upgrade to an orbital command, and if I hadn't done that, I suppose I could have built that factory much sooner. I can't remember how long it takes to upgrade to an orbital command, but that's a significant amount of time, and in that time you can't be building SCVs either. So that's a pretty big difference. Now looking at the supply tab, we can see that we are pretty close on army supply. I'm actually ahead, look at that, by a little bit, and behind on the worker supply. His orbital command is already up, and so he is building 2 reactors on these 2 barracks, so going to be putting out a ton of infantry, a bunch of Marines. Now that's, you know, with reactors on these, they essentially act as doubles, so that's 200 minerals a minute out of each one, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 Marines a minute coming out of each one, and about 2 Marauders a minute coming out of this one. So he's going to have a lot of infantry right away, and that's why this group of Marines is not going to do very well against that. If we check out the Army Supply tab. He's much higher in Army Supply and Worker Supply, so I don't think I was ever supply blocked, but as you can see here, I am not building workers right now, so that would explain the difference in supply. So this group up here is going to meet a pretty massive group of Marines and Marauders. I mean, look at that. I mean, his Marauders, he has so many Marauders that they've started to route down here, and so he brings them out. I think he did see me at this point, and he's just going to annihilate these Marines. Now I tried to run away, and I was surprised to find that they died. And I think it's because, oh, see, look at that. So his Marauders actually have the concussive shells, which slowed, oh, it's a little piece of Marine blasted away there. So the Marauders actually had concussive shells, so it wasn't just the stem that allowed the Marauders and the Marines to catch up to my units, but it was also the concussive shell which slowed down their units as well. I mean, you could even actually see that in action earlier. So this group of units, they're pretty damaged. Coming in here now. Wow, look at the difference in supply, 62 to 39. That's not even including the units killed, although man, he did kill 15 units. Wow, really? There were that many units to die? 15. Wow, so that explains that. And checking out the army supply, he's got a pretty significant army lead. A whole bunch of units coming in here. I'm almost surprised I was able to hold this push off. Now let's take a look at this. How did that even work? Now notice that the range of these tanks, range 7, and these units are all range 6 and range 5. So this tank was actually able to get off a couple of hits on the units coming by here, which is pretty good. Even though siege mode has not been researched yet, you can see it has just been starting to research. But I do have 2 tanks, a Banshee, and just a handful of Marines. Now, don't forget, this is the reinforcement group. I've already lost, according to the Army Supply, or sorry, the Units Killed tab, I've already lost 14 units. I think all of those were Marines, I think, because there's 1 worker and 14 Marines. So I've already lost 14 Marines, which puts me significantly behind in the Army matchup. But if you'll notice just how far apart these units are apart from each other, there's a pretty good distance between these units. So it is taking him quite a bit of time for his units to get across the map. Now he's starting to build a command center, so that's an interesting distinction between the 2 of us, is that he did not go for a factory. He just went 3 barracks pressure and then up to command center, which is excellent. I did suspect that he would expand behind this aggression. So now these units, this is something that I wondered about, is does he have vision up into the high ground? Because I don't think he does. See, look at that. His units went back down off the ramp, which made them lose the vision of the high ground. But I almost want to say I think they have vision to things that are shooting at them. But we'll keep the vision on Goroth's camera, slow this down, and see what he can see. Yeah, he can no, he couldn't. He couldn't. So until he brought the units up to this ramp, I actually had a couple of rounds of free hits. So I think at this point, yeah, see, it's really too bad that I lost that tank. I think he must have focus fired on that tank from the low ground. So at this point, yeah, you know, I think once these units, see, I should have killed that guy. See, now that I've killed that guy, his units, I think they can see the Banshee, but that's about it. So he's going to lose all of these units, and actually the supply count's going to be brought down pretty well now. Now our army supply is very similar, although I have more high-tech units. And worker supply, he's up ahead, and he's almost finished with his expansion command center. So he's doing very well at this point, and these units, now this is cool. These guys are actually going to be able to kill this tank, which is the power of a stemmed marauder. I mean, him by himself, he's basically able to kill that tank by himself, which is pretty amazing. So that's amazing, isn't it? Just a couple Marines and that 1 Marauder were essentially able to kill that tank practically by themselves. So that really says something about the Marauder there, and I really should have pulled the tank back. If you remember earlier, we were comparing the ranges of the different units, and the tank does have a slight range advantage on the Marauder, and definitely a range advantage on the Marines. So I should have been able to back it off and repair it. So that was an unnecessary loss on that side. But at this point, he is up on worker supply by about 4, behind an army supply, but he can resupply very quickly with all of these barracks, and it looks like he's going now for a factory. So up until this point, he's been going strictly on infantry units. Now he does have a lot of minerals banked up, which is not that much of a problem for him really, because he can build a lot of units at the same time. He's also researched that combat shield, so his Marines have 10 more hit points than mine do, because I don't think I have any upgrades whatsoever. So I think that really explains why his army was just so strong. He had so many units, he had a lot of good economy. Yeah, he's expanded at this point, so now his economy is just going to skyrocket, and he should be able to build as many of whatever he wants to build. Which in this case, you know, lots of Marines. So this does explain, I don't see an engineering bay anywhere around here. Oh, double engineering bay. So he's going either, probably for upgrades. You don't really see double engineering bay unless they're going for upgrades. So, but I haven't seen, I mean, when these finish, it'll be interesting to see if he built any kind of detection, because I believe I have not started research of that at all. I was fairly gas starved. So building a lot of these Banshees though, so the only anti-air he has is all these Marines, but I mean he can build a lot of Marines at once. So I'm really not even sure how much damage the Banshees will do. Now 2 orbital commands are up. Now that's an interesting point. You know, he doesn't need to spend perhaps as much money on missile turrets to give air defense and detection, because he's got the 2 orbital commands. He can plop down a scan whenever he needs to at any particular place that he needs to. So at this point, even though he was behind supply-wise, his economy is just so much stronger than mine is at this point. Popping up the income tab, wow, 1,300 to 700, and his gas, of course, is higher. So at this point, I guess even though I'm ahead in supply, you know, technically here, 80 to 75, I think I am significantly behind, and you can see that in the worker supply, 37 to 27. That's a pretty big difference. So I don't really think that, you know, even had this push been successful, he was so ahead at this point, and you know, his looks like he already researched. Nope. Okay, looks like he's researching his 2 upgrades for that, and of course he has stim already for his infantry units. Now, it would have been interesting to see, because I really don't have that many Marines. Right? Yeah, I only have 14 Marines compared to his, wow, almost 24 Marines. And a tank, now just coming out, so that does explain. Oh boy, I didn't realize how close I was to actually making a difference here. These Banshees represent a pretty serious threat. 8 Banshees is quite a bit, and if I would have had Cloak, he would have been in serious trouble. But in this case, I was going basically for a full frontal assault, and there's just so many Marines here. Now, it'd be interesting to see, neither of us had any vision, so when he decided to move out in front of his base, that was just purely him deciding that that was a better place to be. I'm almost surprised he hasn't sieged up his tank. Oh, and these 4 Hellions are what kind of gave me away there. So as soon as these Hellions come in, this tank should be sieging up quite soon. And oh, look at that. So he had kind of a nice concave before I even arrived. And I think all of these guys, oh, they are on attack. I wasn't sure if they were sent on attack move or not. But look at this. See, the speed of these SCVs, they can move. They're pretty speedy. 2.81 compared to the Marines, which are 2.25. And the Banshees are 2.75. So these SCVs are actually faster than the Banshees by just a little bit. So it was SCVs and Banshees coming into this group, which this group will just tear up either of those, especially without Cloak. So watching them, look at that, they just annihilate half of those SCVs immediately, and that concussive shell preventing the units from getting away. And then, of course, this tank just running straight into the mix. And as I mentioned in my previous gamer, that was just a mistake. Now, I think these guys weren't set on attack mode when they moved forward, so that was just a huge mistake there. And these Banshees, you know, when faced with all of these Marines, can do a terrible amount of damage. Now, there's not very many Marines left from what was there originally. There were a ton of Marines in that group. So, there you go. I guess that shows that upgraded Marines and Marauders with STEM can hold off a huge amount of army. And, of course, you know, sacrificing all those SCVs, that leads to basically no supply left for me. So I think that was a good example of showing how, when you've been practicing a build and you've done this build, over and over again, that doing a change, even just a slight change, all I did was add a barracks, that can completely change the rest of the build. I mean, I ended up doing 2 starports at the end to try to kind of catch up there, and I did a fairly good job. If I had decided to take those banshees and use them in a different way, that may have worked out a little bit better. But I think you can really see how, if you've got this really kind of tight concept of your timing and when you're going to attack and what units I'm going to have to attack. I mean, I had this whole thing planned out, like I'm going to send the first wave at 6.5 minutes or 7.5 minutes, and it's going to get there at about 8, and then they're going to pull back, and then I'm going to get a bunch of reinforcements. And if you've thought about your plan in such a tight manner, adding this one building will completely change that if you're not careful and if you don't compensate. Like, for example, I could have delayed upgrading to the orbital command, and this is something that I've had a lot of trouble with, is remembering to include the upgrade to the orbital command when I'm thinking about the timing of the game. So and admittedly, the end of this game was rushed a bit. My kids were getting up in the morning, so I was like, oh, gotta end the game, gotta get going. So that did kind of accelerate things, but I do think it was clear after those after that first engagement up here when I lost the 14 Marines, and then down here when I lost that tank, and I lost a bunch of units, and I lost a Banshee. So I lost a Banshee and a tank in this attack up here, which I probably could have done it in such a way that I wouldn't have lost the Banshee, would have saved the tank, and all those things put me at a pretty good army disadvantage. I think our army production was similar between Goroth and myself, but he did a really good job of focusing on a particular set of units. He did the barracks, and he did right away get upgrades for his Marines and Marauders, all 3 of the upgrades for them off this tech lab fairly quickly. So kudos for him for doing that. And I mean, later on he was doing the double research, but I think what that shows is, even with this long distance, he was able to put on a tremendous amount of pressure just from barracks, just from these 3 barracks, Marines, and Marauders, which is a great strategy, something that I would definitely have you guys take a look at. Maybe I'll take a look at that myself. That's pretty fun. And he also was ready for the long game. He had gone out to expand, and I mean, actually at this point he has the right amount of income, 1100, 400. He can do a lot with that, and thus you saw some other tech buildings being built later on. So I think that was a pretty good example of a ramp up on his side, of how to ramp up through the tech buildings, and of course on my side, how much yeah, just adding that one barracks really changes the beginning, which in more when the more advanced players play, that's one of the things they scout for, right? If they see double barracks, that implies something about the rest of what's going on in the base. And I mean, he could have seen, oh, he's got a double barracks, he's probably not building a factory, and that was the truth. I wasn't. So that's a very, very interesting point. So yeah, good review. GosuDad signing off, and we'll see you guys next time.